This is the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast, episode number 46.
You ever stick your glasses up your nose to make you sneeze?
No.
It works.
I don't have glasses.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast. My name is John Melly, and this is the podcast dedicated to teaching in-depth and advanced marketing strategies for people in the voiceover and audio production professions. My goal is to help you make more money by showing you ways to leverage your time, charge more for your talents, and allow you to spend more time doing the things you want to do in your life. Hey, this is John. How are you? Thanks for spending some time with me today. I do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Man, we have had a lot of downloads of the podcast in the last couple of weeks, in no small part due to the great content and episodes we've had with Tanya Sims and Kelly Buttrick for the last 3 episodes, and it's just been fantastic. I want to welcome any new listeners to the podcast. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for subscribing. And I want to thank all of the folks who've recently joined the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast group on Facebook and on LinkedIn. I don't have the LinkedIn account open right now, but we're up to 927 members on the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast group on Facebook alone, with 14 new members in the last couple of days. So we're getting about 7 people joining a day. Thank you. Welcome. We'll be giving you a shout out in Facebook to welcome you into the group. So thank you for joining. I hope you find the content valuable. I also want to thank John Florian from VoiceOver Extra and Dan Leonard and George Witham from VOBS TV, the VOBS podcast. Last episode they did on Monday, they did a really nice shout out to this podcast about one of the episodes that I did a ways back. Drugs can help your voiceover marketing, or can drugs help your voiceover marketing? And I'm thrilled that they were intrigued by that topic enough to talk about it in their news section of their podcast this past Monday. So thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. I've got some interesting things I want to share with you today. It's going to be a solo episode, and I'm going to ask you a few questions and maybe some things to consider, and also want to share with you some neat correspondence that I got from Tanya Sims, who was on 3 episodes ago, how to create your own book and make money from it. And that was episode number 43. Great number of downloads for that one. So far, there have been 1,215 downloads of that episode alone. That's maybe a month and a half old at this point. So that's really, really good. It's a very popular episode. If you've been at the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast group on Facebook, you may have seen a few polls that I've been putting up there. So I want to share the results of those with you. But first, let's go to Tanya's email. She sent me an email because I was letting her know that we were getting a lot of downloads of that episode, episode 43. She wrote back to me, "Hi, John. Thanks for letting me know. I'll have to check," because I was asking her if she'd gotten some sales as a result of that. We promoted her book in the podcast episode. And then she also writes, "I remember on one of your episodes that you, me, had stated to get what you're worth, even if it means turning down work." And she wrote to tell me that she just did that. I guess the client or the prospective client offered her a rate, and she turned them down, saying that that's too low. So she says, "I just did that, and today they emailed me back wanting to work out something else." And then she writes, "It really works. The ability to walk away if it's not what you're looking for or if it doesn't meet what you want. That really works." That's really, really cool. I appreciate you writing to follow up with that, Tanya. And that is known as takeaway selling. When you've got somebody who's interested, but they're hemming and hawing, you say, "You know what? This isn't for you." And you take away the opportunity. People will chase after things that they perceive that they can't have more than if they just take them for granted that it's going to be around for them, ready for them, waiting for them whenever they get around to it. So kudos to Tanya for having the courage to say, "You know what? I'm worth more than this. I'm going to say no. Even though I could use the job and maybe a little bit of money, I'm going to turn it down." And it worked for her. That's a success. So Tanya, thank you for that. Thank you, and congratulations on your courage to stand up for the price that you want to get. I think that's awesome. Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. The Voice Over Marketing Podcast is sponsored by the book Voice Over Legal by Rob Siglampaglia. You don't think you need this book? Here's a question for you. Have you ever been asked to do a celebrity impression for a commercial? If you have, you might want to think twice, unless you live in a particular state. You can find out why impersonations can be a problem and why you could get sued if you do one, and which state is exempt from all of that on page 28 of the Voice Over Legal book. Now, we've arranged a discount for you to save up to $5. That's up to 20% off the list price of the book, and you can support the podcast at the same time. If you're a voice artist and you're treating your business as a business, you need this book. Just go to voiceoverlegal.com. When you go to voiceoverlegal.com, enter the promo code VMP at checkout to save $5 off the cost of the book. That's promo code V as in voice, M as in marketing, and P as in podcast at checkout to save $5 off the cost of the book, and you'll support the podcast at the same time. Thanks. And now back to the show. So you may have noticed that we have been doing a couple of polls on the Voice Over Marketing Podcast group in Facebook. One of them being, what social media platforms do you use? And I ask you to check all that apply. And not surprisingly, since this poll was on Facebook, Facebook ranked number one. But I also have LinkedIn, and this is in order of popularity. It goes Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. And then I have three more options. One person has said Google+, another for Vine, and other. And I asked them to specify what the other was in the comments below, but I don't think I got that. Now, the reason for that poll was I'm promoting the podcast. And so what I wanted to know is what percentage of my audience is on these different platforms. Now, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I pretty much am on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and sometimes Google+. I have never been to Instagram nor Pinterest, or if I have been on Pinterest, it's by accident. Vines, I don't want to go to Vines, and other, who knows. The reason I asked the question was because, and I'll step back for a second. Why don't I want to go to Vines? Because it is like the epitome of the short attention span. It's like 6 seconds of video, I think. I don't want to be spending all my time looking at 6-second videos. You know, it's crazy. And I don't want to produce stuff for a 6-second video. I mean, it takes as much time. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to set it up right and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to make sure that it's right. And to spend that amount of time on either end of the recording for 6 seconds, not there. But the reason I asked this question was I wanted to see what platforms people are using. And let me tell you something. If the vast majority of people who answered this, or a significant number of people who had answered this poll, said that they were going to be on Vines, then I would look at Vines. Because if they're there, that means I could research Vines a little bit more and find a different audience or a different segment of the voiceover audience at Vines. The results of this poll indicate to me that I don't really need to spend a lot of time there because one person said that they are on Vines. But Instagram is something I should probably look at. Pinterest, not so much. And Google+, while I spend some time there, not very many people do. So this is interesting information for me because I'm right on with Facebook because there's a lot of voiceover activity on Facebook. I know that. You know that because there are a lot of voiceover groups on Facebook. And I'm members of several of them like you are. A lot of folks are on Twitter and on LinkedIn. I'm doing those things. So why I did this poll was to see if there are other social media platforms that I should be on to promote this podcast. And I've done this research now, and this is great. What it's telling me is that I should be looking into Instagram at this point. Maybe Pinterest. Google+, I can continue to do what I do there, which isn't much, pretty much just post episodes. Vines I'm not even going to bother with because I'm not interested in it, and seems like not enough people are either. That was interesting. The other poll I did came as a result of a comment. Kelly Buttrick and I were trading back and forth about the word or words voiceover. And what I wanted to do is find out how people write and or search for the term voiceover. And so I gave 3 different options. One was voiceover, 1 word. The second one was voiceover, 2 words. And the third option was voice-over. There was some interesting feedback on that. Doug Turkel replied with some really good comments, basically said for SEO purposes, all of them. And I agree with that. And then he followed up with, more importantly, how do your potential clients search for it? Another excellent point. Now, to be perfectly candid, this Facebook group is for the Voiceover Marketing Podcast. So my potential clients are voiceover people like you. So that's why I asked, how do you write or search for the term voiceover? Voiceover, 1 word, voiceover, 2 words, voice-over. The majority of folks prefer voiceover, 1 word. Kelly said that she thinks it should be 1 word. And she said it's a soapbox issue for her. So anyway, but other folks are citing the dictionary and all of that kind of stuff. But as Doug Turkel says, for SEO purposes, he uses all of them. I agree. But I know from this poll that the majority of voiceover people write it as 1 word. So I'm testing here. I'm showing you some research. The final poll that I had was, what do you want future episodes of the podcast to cover? And I gave a few options. One option was a solo episode with me covering a specific topic or strategy. I guess you could say that this episode is about polling and asking questions. The other option was interviews, like I've done with Tanya and Kelly and dozens of other folks on the show. And I asked if you had specific guests you want me to invite, to please write them down in the comments below. Some of you did that. I want to thank Mike Broderick for recommending 3 great guest ideas. And so I'm going to be following up with those. Mike, thank you for your participation. I really appreciate it. It's always great to hear from you. The majority of folks want me to do solo episodes with me covering a specific topic. A close second was a combination of solo episodes and interviews. And interestingly enough, the lowest number of responses was interviews, which kind of surprised me, to be honest with you. So I think what we'll do is probably a combination of the two, because that was a close second, and probably fewer interviews and more episodes covering a specific topic or strategy, which is kind of what we're doing here today with the polling. So I want to encourage you to do research on your market. Now, perfectly candid, my market for this podcast is to get more voiceover people listening to the podcast. So I'm doing research. What kind of episodes do you want? How are you searching for voiceover information? And where are you searching for voiceover information? What social media platforms are you using? Where online are you going to get information? And what are you typing into your search requests? Is it voiceover 1 word, voiceover 2 words, voice-over, those things? And then once you get there, are you going to like the episodes? So there was a method to this madness. And so I wanted to show you all of that. So I think that's all I've got. I'll talk to you next week. Uncle Frank, say goodbye to everybody for us, will you?
Our program originates in the Boston studios. We hope you'll join us again. Until then, we bid you au revoir, keep your chin up, and the best of luck.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Voiceover Marketing Podcast. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to it at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com so you'll get notices of new episodes, and please share it with your friends and colleagues in the voiceover world. Also, it would be a huge help if you'd like this podcast and rate it on iTunes to help keep it near the top of the list. Feel free to share your comments and questions about this episode and future topics you'd like discussed at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com. And if you'd like more information on one-on-one coaching where we focus on growing your business, feel free to drop me a line at my cyber assistant's email address at mike@johnmelly.com. Thanks for listening. Now go out there and share your voice with the world.